I would have like a hazy vision at the time, which I also thought I would think, is this like a medical issue that I'm having? I don't think I had ever heard of the word like derealization and depersonalization before that. I asked the doctor if I could draw it out for him. And in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to be able to draw it out for him, this and that. And then when I drew it, it was just me in a bubble.
Hey everyone, I'm Sean O'Connor, author of the Depersonalization Manual, and today I'm speaking with Rocio Rodriguez, 25 years old from Miami, Florida. Starting in 2019, Rocio suffered with depersonalization and derealization for about a year and a half. But thankfully, she has since made a complete recovery, and she's with us today to tell us about her experience with and recovery from depersonalization disorder. Rocio, you're very welcome to the channel. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on the channel. Rocio, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So I just graduated from my master's program, which was in behavior analysis. I was born in Cuba, but have lived in Miami, Florida since I was 5 years old. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice. How's life in Miami?
Good. It's pretty hot, but we're actually having our first cooler day today, so that's nice.
Okay, good to hear. Rocio, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with DPDR and how did it start for you?
Yes. Okay. So it began roughly around 2019, the end of it. And it was right when the pandemic begun. I remember it was very parallel to what was happening with the world. And it was kind of added a layer to that. Um, it began, I have my own theory of having had very little sleep at the time and just sort of staying out late at night and just having like a much like unhealthier lifestyle, I would say, at the time. And it kind of all caught up to me, and I think it led to sort of like at the time I did not know it was called that, so that's something to keep in mind. So
And was it something that kind of happened gradually? Was it like the feelings kind of like built up over time, or was there an immediate event?
yeah, for me it was definitely a gradual onset, not it was nothing as of, sudden.
Yeah. And what did that feel like?
It was very confusing. I didn't know what was happening, so it was a weird experience at the time. um I kind of was trying to find answers, and I was very much taking the approach of finding out what was happening. And I would like Google search and, just try to find what was happening, because at the time it felt like an emergency, because I knew that this is not how I used to feel. But then at the same time, I would forget how I used to feel. So that was also it was unsettling. That's the word I could use. Um,
Yeah. So you had just so where were you in your education at this point?
I was in the midst of my bachelor's degree. Yeah,
Okay.
I would say like
So
half, a little bit over.
okay. And what was that in?
The what?
The bachelor's degree. What were you studying?
Oh, I was studying, criminology and sociology at the time,
Okay. Okay.
which the
Great.
criminology did not help with, the paranoia and yeah.
I can imagine. So you're halfway through your bachelor's degree, and I'm pretty sure you're working quite hard.
Mhm.
So that's stressing you out. You're not sleeping properly, and then COVID happens, which is stressful for the whole world. Presumably, like social life kind of is curtailed. Meeting people, speaking to people is all curtailed as well. And then the stress starts building up, and you start noticing these symptoms.
Exactly, yes. The symptoms I was experiencing was just I would have, like, a hazy vision at the time, which I also thought I would think, "Is this, like, a medical issue that I'm having? Is this something else?" Like, again, I did not know that it was I don't think I had ever heard of the word, like, derealization and depersonalization before that. So I kept trying to find reasons as to why I was feeling this way. Obviously, I was like, okay, I'm not exactly sleeping as much as I should, but at the same time, it was nothing. I was sleeping. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary compared to my friends or compared to people my age. It was nothing out of the ordinary. So I was starting to think it was just anxiety. which again, derealization does is the basis is anxiety. So that again, I found out after. But I was not feeling within myself or like feeling like I was real, and that terrified me. And that's pretty much what would lead to more anxiety. So it was kind of this cycle of, you know,
Yeah.
feeling
And
worse.
and did you speak to any therapists or medical professionals about this, or was it purely kind of researching it yourself?
Yes. So I would research myself, and then I reached out to my parents and I was like, okay, I think something is wrong with me. I don't know what it is, but it has to do with mental health. And then my parents, thankfully, they are very supportive, and they were very supportive at the time. And they were like, okay, we don't have the tools to help you in that way. So let's seek medical help. So at the time, we went to emergency, which is, if someone knows, they know that's not the best way to approach it. But again, we did not know the steps because I had never even spoken to psychologists, no one ever in my life. So I didn't know exactly what the steps to getting help was. So I went to emergency. This was again right when the pandemic begun. I believe it was like March 14ish at the time, which is when it had made its way over to Florida, COVID. So I reached out to the emergency room. They asked me a few questions, did not get very far. And then I wasn't able to speak to a psychologist at the time because that's not how that works, at least here in the United States. So I wasn't able to get any help or any answers or anything. It was very pretty much counteractive because it was even more of a stressful environment that I was put into. So
Mm. And so the primary symptoms you were experiencing was the feeling of unreality. Was that it?
yes, I actually had a doctor. I asked the doctor if I could draw it out for him. And in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to be able to draw it out for him, this and that. And then when I drew it, it was just me in a bubble, like in a circle. And then
Right.
like people outside. And it's, it doesn't seem, what you're trying to explain doesn't seem even real, which is just what you're feeling. So it's hard to explain that to someone unless they've been through it. That's what I've realized, which,
Absolutely. It's such a common thing when people speak to medical professionals that they're like one of the worst barriers is that it's just so difficult to verbalize. I mean, for me, I remember saying things like, I feel like my memory is fragmenting. I feel like things are kind of in a dream and I don't recognize people, but struggling to kind of explain it. But that's very interesting that you attempted to do it with the drawing, like, how did he
yeah.
react? How did they react to that actually when they saw it?
Um, Again, my experience here in the United States with mental health has been on the poor side. I'm not sure how it is in other countries because I've only lived here for most of my life. But it has been one of, it makes me sad for other people that have to go through like mental health issues or barriers because the help here is like very, number one, is very limited. And number two, the way that the system is set up is not very good. Obviously, there are things set up in place for the safety of everyone. But once it comes down to like actually being listened to or heard in those situations, it's very, very small. Like the time is very just time constraints, and sadly, yeah,
Yeah.
not very
So
good.
you came away from that experience no further in understanding what was
No,
happening.
no. I received like a few mental health diagnoses that were later found out they were not correct. It's very common to be misdiagnosed at the beginning. I'm sure that goes for a lot of places, but yeah, it was not. Number one, it was not correct, and number two, it was they were trying to pretty much like umbrella medicate me, which is like again done out of the. It's a way to have the patient be safe, and I can see the reason that they do it. But yeah, I was not able to find out what was actually wrong with me um till like much later on when I found out by myself. That makes sense.
Mm. And so the umbrella medication, that's interesting. I haven't heard that term before, but I presume that refers to giving you medication, like general medication for anxiety or depression. Is that
Exactly.
correct?
Yes, so it would be like an antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication and maybe like a mood stabilizer, I believe. It was like a cocktail to, it will address like certain issues or an umbrella of issues, which again is a great approach. But when I went home, I knew that that's not what was wrong with me. Um, or it could be impartial to that, but I knew that there was like something else because I guess you only know how you feel. But
Yeah. And what was your living situation at this time? Were you on campus, or were you living with your parents, or where were you?
no, I was living with my parents, yeah. I was never on campus because my university is, like, close enough to my house, so
Okay, okay. And yeah, of course, the added stress of like worrying about your parents during COVID as well.
yes.
Um, yeah, yeah, certainly. Um, so Rocio, at what point did you find the term depersonalization or derealization? Was it through a Google search? Is that correct?
Yes. I was Googling a few things, which obviously, like, doesn't help at times, but in this case, I would say that it helped me at least find something to work towards. Does that make sense? It was a way of finding, "Okay, this is the same exact thing." I remember finding it through Reddit, like a forum, and then I Googled it, I put it into YouTube, I found your video. I'll never forget that video. And you kind of had like images and like visuals when it came to how it felt, which was like, okay, this is not just words. This seems like exactly what I'm feeling. And then that's how I was able to kind of read more into derealization, depersonalization. And I was like, okay, this is exactly how I've been feeling for like such a long time. But then it was like labeled all these different things, but that's not exactly what I was feeling. Like, I remember feeling depressed because I had been derealized for so long.
Right.
But I think it was like in that order, which again does not matter because at the end of the day, you want to target the derealization. But I think it was in that order for me. I was so, like, I was on this autopilot mode for so long with the derealization that I became depressed from that and just kind of like hopeless.
Yeah. And how long was that, Rocio, between when it first started and when you found out what the condition was?
I would say, hmm, like 8 months to a year. So, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's always the most difficult time in the condition is between developing it and finding out what it is, because you feel so rudderless, like you feel so
exactly.
um I was talking to someone recently about it, actually, in another recovery interview, and we were describing it like being in a pinball machine.
Mm,
You're just getting kind of knocked around back and forth, and it just feels so chaotic. And what you so desperately want to find is, as you said, something to work towards. Because you kind of, I think at some point you stop kind of thinking, well, I can just switch this off overnight. You may hope for that, but you start to kind of realize, okay, this might take a bit of time, a bit of work, and that's fine.
exactly.
But I can't. But nobody can point me in that direction. So I'm
Mhm.
just in this kind of state of chaos constantly, and I don't know how to move forward with it. So how were you in that time, Rocio? How were you managing your studies? Because I presume like everything had kind of moved online during COVID at that stage, right?
Yeah. So at the time I would it would help me when I was busy with things. It would help me to be kind of working towards like an assignment or working or being in a classroom. But I remember even being on Zoom, I would kind of feel I would get that moment of, oh my God, am I real? Am I, which are, now that I look back, they're also just intrusive thoughts that we pay so much attention to. Um, and we cater to them, which I would say I still have intrusive thoughts of that kind, but I'm just like, yeah, we're not going to give that any attention, and you move on, which is fine. But at the time I was like, oh my gosh, like I need to solve this after the assignment, or I need to, and I would get into the cycle of, yeah.
Someone described it to me recently as being, it feels like it becomes your full-time job,
Mm-hmm.
you know, trying to figure out and solve DPDR becomes this thing that you dedicate your life to. And if you're studying or working, especially in that first period of time with it that becomes almost secondary. And you're like, well, I need to get this out of the way so I can get back to my real job and try to figure
Exactly.
out what's going on with me.
Yep.
The depression thing is interesting too, as well, that you mentioned, Rocio, because and it's something that, like, at the time when I was going through it, I really felt terrified because I had had ups and downs in my life, but like I'd never experienced really like kind of strong feelings of depression.
Yes.
And what I realized as I recovered was that when I looked back on what had happened to me, and being in that pinball machine and going through that kind of level of chaos and not being able to get a foothold on anything around me, like of course I felt depressed. Like, of course I felt a sense of like grief and loss for the life that I had, and just a deep sense of frustration. But what I realized was that frustration was coming out of a sense of almost practicality, of just like, well, it would be strange if I didn't feel depressed about this situation, because it feels so bleak, and no one can seem to help me, and I can't seem to help me. Um, what would have been your lowest point in the experience, Rocio? Is there a particular time or event that you
Yeah.
remember?
So when I left the hospital, I was put on like a cocktail of medication, again, an umbrella term. And for me, the lowest point was kind of losing. When I say losing sense of reality, it was, the depersonalization, realization, but I would still wake up and be there. But there was like a period of 2 weeks where I completely lost like actual autonomy. Like my mom had to bathe me. Like I had to pretty much like depend completely on her. And I have no memory or like recollection of that time. It was a month of April, COVID time, 2020. And that to me was like the most scary thing ever because I lost, it felt like I had been dead for like a month. Again, it's a very common, after being able to like look it up and stuff, it's a common thing when you've never been on any medication in your life and then you're put on like so many at the same time. Your brain can have this kind of like shutdown, almost like if it was like a computer. Um, and you can lose your memory, you can lose like fragments of time. So for me, that was like very scary. And after I was able to come back to myself and get off the medications that I knew I didn't have to be on these things because I was not even diagnosed with what I was actually feeling, you know. So that was, I would say, like the lowest point. And then I was able to work from that on, but it was like very difficult.
What were the medications you were on, Rocio? I mean, not even specifically the brand names, but what kinds of medication were they?
I don't remember exactly the names at the time, and like I've purposely forgotten like certain things from that time, but I know it was like an antidepressant or two. There was like mood stabilizers. There was like an antipsychotic. There was, again, it's like umbrella medicating just in case. It could be this, it could be that, but we're not sure. And that's
Mm.
done in the mental health system out of, trying to save the patient. And I totally understand that. It makes sense.
So it's covering every possibility, like.
Yes, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
So it was just anti-anxiety medication. It was like so many things. And yeah. And you try to
Yeah.
do what the doctor says at the beginning because obviously they know more than you. But at the end of the day, with mental health, it's like so tricky.
Yeah. And obviously, kind of not being. I mean, I don't know. Had you had experience with medications before?
Never. Nope.
So you're going. It's a real, like, baptism of fire. You're getting like a
Hmm.
full range of medications, and in the middle of COVID as well. Like, that must have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
for every medication, there's like side effects. So imagine for like all those medications.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the loss of autonomy as well
Hmm.
is such a major thing. For me, it was like being 25 years old back home living with my parents. My work was gone, relationship I was in was over. Having to rely on, my mom to cook for me, and even to get me out of bed in the mornings, like it was not where I'd expected to be, and your confidence takes a big hit, like, and adds to the feelings of depression as well. Like they're there. It feels like the opposite of where you should be moving towards especially in your mid-20s, when you're building your independence, you're building your confidence and your strength, and then suddenly it's yanked out from underneath you.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So with all that said, Rocio, when and how did your recovery start?
So I remember I found your YouTube video, and I had this routine set up where I would pretty much have like my assignments, do this. I was also tutoring at the time. That was my job. So I would go.
You were tutoring as well.
Yes, yeah, which was great at that time. This was after, I would feel much better.
Okay.
I was just like, okay, I'm back to square one pretty much. Like none of this stuff was how I was feeling. I need to find out what I actually feel now that I'm back to square one of how I was feeling before. Does that make sense?
You mean being off the medication, is it?
Yes. I was like, okay, that's not. But then I was feeling the derealization, which again, square one. That's just what I've
Right.
always been feeling since before COVID. So I would have this routine of where I would like try to work out. Sometimes it would happen, sometimes wouldn't. But then I would go sit at this park, and then I would like try to find ways to like help myself, or just like, you know. And then I found the YouTube video, and I found like other things about derealization, depersonalization. And I was like, okay, let's try to make like a game plan, and I remember I found the manual, and I was like, okay, I felt silly. I had never bought anything in my life from like an internet person or anything. So I was like, okay, you know what? Like I have literally nothing to lose. So I went and I purchased it, and then I kind of put the audio on that you have. I think it's like a book. And I had it by chapters, and I think I was gonna do 3 of the audios a day, kind of like homework. And then when I started listening to it, I kind of listened to all of it within like 1 or 3 days, because it really helped me, and I felt very okay. This is exactly how I've been feeling. So
Good to hear. Um, can you tell me a little bit more, Rocio, about coming off the medication?
sure.
So you had kind of, presumably you kind of come to a point where you felt like it wasn't helping you, but then obviously coming off that amount of medication as well. So did you taper off it slowly,
Yes.
or was it you did? Okay.
Yeah. There was a few. Obviously, I had a psychiatrist that I was working with at the time, and I was able to speak to him and kind of be on a different plan. And but yes, I was tapered and everything done under like professional, because that's also very tricky and nothing that I had enough knowledge to do myself. So
Right. And at what point did you start? Did you start, because I presume your studies never stopped. So you were kind of doing lessons and classes all the time and assignments. And
yes.
then was it after you got off the medication that you said, okay, I'm going to give the tutoring a go as well?
Yes, exactly. I was like, okay, I need to start doing something else. And then eventually everything kind of started to improve. And the derealization kind of, I would say it gradually came off as gradually as it onset. It was like the same, like small. It wasn't just like I woke up one day and it was gone. It was very gradual as well, which was cool. It felt like I was working towards like improving, and you know, and I've realized too at the end of the day, I wasn't it was also that I was not paying as much attention to it, because my life had become like, okay, I need to think again, like you said, it was my full-time job to think about and work towards it, and then everything else got shaped around it. But after I was able to kind of put it in the back burner, and it slowly not pay so much attention to it. And then that helped to just lift it.
Yeah. It's a way I always like to describe it is that recovery from DPDR happens in the rearview mirror. while
Mm,
you're focused on the road. And
exactly.
what you need to do is stop checking the rearview mirror, because that'll take care of itself. But
Exactly.
it takes discipline to keep that focus on the road ahead. But things like what you were doing, like kind of like even for me, like I went back to college. I started a master's degree, but it was towards the end of my time with DPDR. But it was like the best thing I could have done, because it completely filled up that space. Like it completely became the road I was driving on. Like, you know, it took up all the windscreen. I had to be completely focused on that. So I didn't really have time to look in the rearview mirror. But it took so much of the work off my plate of kind of imposing a routine on myself, which I had such trouble doing at home.
Exactly.
Yeah. When you say as well the kind of thing of working towards improving, Rocio, as well, is really, it's a really good way of thinking about it, because what we so often do during recovery is we think of it as a light switch. We think of anxiety being this binary thing that's either on or off.
Mhm.
And we end up kind of like waking up in the morning, we check to see is it on or off. Because we're checking it, that keeps it on, which leads to another 24 hours of frustration. And then frantically trying some other technique or some other combination of techniques, and then checking the next morning to see is it there or not. Um, but it's the checking that is the problem. Um, when you think of it as something that you're working towards, and that there's just kind of little iterative improvements happening all the time, it takes the pressure off you to try and hit these kind of imaginary milestones. And it also trains you away from thinking about it as being a binary system, which of course it isn't. It's a spectrum. It's anxiety. It's going up and down all the time. But we're just training ourselves away from fight or flight anxiety. Um, can you talk a little bit more, Rocio, about what it felt like to kind of get back to normal, and kind of like, so what did it actually feel like for these feelings to be fading away in the background? Was it just that you were able to kind of, oh, and also at what point in COVID was this all still happening kind of mid COVID?
Well, for I live in Florida, so for Florida, it was we kind of never closed as much as other countries or other cities as I
That's
saw.
right.
So I wouldn't be able to tell you at what point, because it was all kind of the same here. It wasn't that we weren't very limited compared to what I've saw other places go through. But everything was pretty much normal. People were out, like out and about. I was able to get from point A to point B, no problem. So for me, COVID was like pretty much done. But I know that COVID was very much still going on around in the world. And the actual like virus was still going around. But I was able to kind of get on and go back to school in person. I graduated for my bachelor's, and then soon after, again, I was like, okay, I'm going to do a master's in a way to keep myself busy because I knew that that was, you know, what was good for me because otherwise I would keep my mind busy with just overthinking and etc. I hadn't mastered a way to not do that yet. And what you mentioned earlier about checking, like I would wake up and check if it was on or off. And I would do that every single day. It was like, okay, is it still here? Is it still there? And you're just checking throughout the day, which is just like confirmation bias in your brain. The same way that we would see, oh, I haven't seen any like bugs out on the street today, like the car. And then the next day you ask yourself, you're gonna see like five um bugs out on the street. And it's just because your brain, that your like algorithm in your brain is now set to look out for the bugs. And that's what I was doing throughout my entire day. I was just checking and like any symptom, like, oh, like kind of blurryish vision. I'm sure everyone has like discrepancies or like differences in their vision throughout the day, but you don't pay attention. I don't pay attention to it anymore. I'm just like, okay, whatever, it's my vision. But at the time I would be like, oh my God, that is confirmation that I am sick. I am this, I am that. And it's just kind of like, you know, leading to you feeling worse and you're making a lot out of nothing. At least that's how it was for me. I was just kind of like catastrophic thinking. I think that's what it's called. That you just kind of keep adding to it, even though it might have not been even that big of a deal in the beginning. So kind of looking out for that for me really helped me too. Like being like, okay, I'm just adding this to it, but at the end of the day, I might have had this my entire life, but I'm just overthinking.
Yeah. Vision discrepancies is it's such a great example because it's so immediate, and
Mhm.
like people so often describe seeing floaters and tracers and visual snow and um places like shopping malls and um even being at the cinema, like you could feel like it's too bright and there's too much happening, feel quite overwhelming. um and a lot of people do what I did, which is go to get an eye test, and then they find out there's nothing wrong. Your eyes are perfectly fine. There's no diseases. There's nothing wrong. And then what you realize as you recover is that things like floaters and tracers are absolutely normal parts of human vision. They're like completely like normal. Like people experience them all the time, but most people just don't pay attention to them because when you're in fight or flight response, you are hyper aware of things happening in your visual field, which is extremely helpful if you're getting chased by a wild animal or anything like that. But it's not useful when you're driving your car and there's the sky is up ahead of you and you start seeing these little kind of floaters and tracers and then panicking. That means that something is terribly wrong, and then getting into the catastrophic thought loop with it. um Everyone sees these things. They're normal parts of human vision. It's just that for someone who has anxiety, they are hyper aware of them. And as anxiety fades away and stops, as you recover, you simply stop paying attention to them. They're still there, but
Yeah.
now you're too busy watching the movie or
Yeah. Like I have
drive the car.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But I
Um,
would pay attention to like any floaters or anything in my vision. I would be like, oh my God, I would be spooked and just kind of like would be another Google search. And then, oh my God. Yeah. You don't get very far with that. And I remember you mentioning something else about like the forums, how no one ever goes back and writes good things on them. And that's why the other day I went back onto your YouTube channel and I commented because I was like, I'm not gonna be do the same thing where no one goes back and shares that, they're doing better. Because someone that is doing better is usually I've never looked anything up again. Like I don't go there. I'm like maybe entertained with something else. But so yeah, when you're on the forums, it all seems like hopeless, but it's not. It's just the population that is there right now is me when I was going through that,
yeah.
you know? But then after you kind of abandon the forums, you like move on to other things and then it seems like super negative, but it's like there's
Yeah.
hope a lot. So
Of course. Yeah. And it is definitely, it feels like the forums often feel like, because they're populated by people who are primarily by people who are going through this, and because the mindset of people who go through anxiety conditions like that is based on catastrophizing, the vast majority of the posts are going to feel like that, and they're going to feel tough to encounter, especially at first. Um, something I often reference when I speak to people is that like DPDR is an anxiety-based condition.
mhm.
1 in 3 people will develop an anxiety-based condition at some point in their lives. These are the most common things in the world. They're completely harmless. They're completely temporary. And um, you probably know a bunch of people already who've gone through something similar to this. Like, I mean, across the range of anxiety-based conditions. But the people who have recovered from this are not walking around high-fiving each other saying, isn't it great that I don't feel DPDR? Isn't it great that my agoraphobia is gone? Like, nice one, happy days. Like, of course not. And the reason they're not doing that is because, number one, it has nothing to do with them anymore. It's like, it's like, why would I think about heart palpitations that I had back in 2009? I mean, I'm glad I'm not experiencing them now, but why would I be actively thinking about them? So it's
Yeah.
just something that happens in the past. And then, of course, like the idea of going to forums to discuss it, feels kind of strange. Like, why would you do that? So you extricate yourself from that and you don't really go back. And then the second reason is that you've got much better things to do with your attention. You've got podcasts, you've got audiobooks and YouTube channels and stuff. So you focus on that instead. And it's a different mindset within the forums to without of the forums. But also I think that once you recover, as frustrating as that experience can be, you only kind of look back on it with, or like anytime I've looked at forums in the meantime, it's just kind of with a sense of compassion and just like, I recognize that. I was that guy for like, well over a year, and I was posting all the time. I met people afterwards who
Yeah.
like in real life who I had actually met through the forums, like, and it felt strange to kind of pull away from it because you feel like it's a supportive community, and it is to a great degree. But at some point, you have to give your body and brain the chance to forget about this, which it will do. And you can't do that if you're constantly logging into forums to discuss the habit of thought that you're trying to let go of.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you gain this different, not perspective, but you able to see it from like a different scope of an outsider of the same bubble that I was in, which is like how I felt like I was recovered. So if back to the drawing, if I was able to draw that in the other way around, it's like, okay, now I'm like, not, I wouldn't say like looking into any bubble, but I'm like outside of the bubble. So, but the bubble was like also my mindset at the time. Like I made that bubble happen too. So it's very tricky, but it's also simpler than I was trying to make it myself. So
Yeah, certainly. There's there's a strong tendency to overcomplicate and narrativize the experience because when the experience feels so huge and you're frantically trying to explain it by, even visually saying, oh, I'm stuck in a bubble, or me saying something like my memory is fragmenting, or I don't recognize myself, it feels like it feels like an earthquake. Like it feels like my whole life is changed because of this. And so when we try to explain it, we tend to choose narratives that feel large because that feels more suited or apt to the scale of the experience. But part of recovery is taking those narratives away, as comforting as they may have been, um, as much as like discussing that narrative with somebody in a DP forum may have felt like it was softening the experience to some degree. But we take those narratives away and we look at it for what it is and say it's just anxiety. It's just anxiety. That bubble that I thought I was stuck inside, it was just anxiety. It was just anxiety and me trying to make sense of an experience that I hadn't had before. But once you simplify it, it gives you the space to put it down and stop expending all that mental bandwidth on trying to figure out something that you already know what it is, essentially. So Rocio, how was the DP manual helpful in your recovery?
it was, number one, it was amazing because I was able to kind of focus on what you were saying, which again was something that when I would Google things and I was just like all over the place when it came to it, I didn't know exactly what steps to take. But it was nice for me. Again, I had the audio file, so I would just play it as a podcast. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna focus on finishing this as if it were like an audiobook, or and I would just play it and focus on that. And then I followed like your advice, and that's pretty much, it helped me not have to make a mental like pattern for myself, if that makes sense. Like I would every day be like, okay, today I'm gonna, check for survival, check for this, check for that, like make sure I have like all the tools in my, like, which I do, that we were born with them. I was just like in a permanent like fight or flight mode. So I was able to kind of lay back on that and just listen to the things, like someone like the advice to not be on the forums. That was very helpful because I was just like doing it to myself too. Um, it was it was great, really.
Good. I'm very glad to hear that. Um, so now that you've recovered, Rocio, what's your day-to-day life like? It sounds like you're quite busy.
Um, yeah, at time right now I graduated, so I'm having a little bit of like downtime after like really busy 2 years of my master's program. So now I'm just like studying for like my board exams and just trying to take, like the steps for like next what's next. But yeah, it's been great. My day to day is like full of like just being pretty calm. I like to exercise a lot. That's something that I found through like um having had this period of like derealization. I have like an extreme what would be the word? Like I think everything is like a privilege to be able to do this, do that, because now I have a comparison of like, okay, I wasn't able to do like so much. And even if you look at it in a time frame, it wasn't that long, but to me it felt like my life had been robbed from me. So now I'm like, oh, I get to exercise. I get to like everything's like instead of such a chore, I'm like, oh, everything's like a privilege, which honestly has been like a great outlook to have in general. So I'm happy I gained that from that. Like I wouldn't have it any other way. So
Yeah. Something that people always ask me, Rocio, is when you get back to normal, you do you actually get back to normal?
yeah, and that's like a weird question because yeah, it's definitely I would say it's normal. I guess normal is like subjective, but yeah, you just won't feel like this like impending homework when it comes to at least like the anxiety that you have, which is nice. Like now I don't have as much to do, at least like in my brain, so that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely takes a lot of this kind of like CPU processing that's been happening 24/7, and you just kind of like turn it down and let it go. And it's like, oh, okay, I can just enjoy a book now or go and watch a movie
Exactly.
and not have this worry kind of ticking away in the background, you know?
Yes. And then just
Um, Go ahead.
like exercising my brain in the sense of when I still of course I still have like these thoughts or like I'll have like an intrusive thought of like, are you still derealized, and I've kind of exercised just being like don't even bother me, and then that kind of becomes stronger and stronger, and then when I have the thought I'm just like, yeah, well, I don't have time for that, and then you kind of are able to like revert your focus to anything else. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like one of the reasons that it doesn't turn into a problem again after recovery um, is because of that knowledge of what it is, because you the recognition of it. Because in recognizing what it is, you prevent that feedback loop from starting up again. Now, what can sometimes happen to people, and it happened to me, and it happens to people from time to time, is once you're out of it, you can completely forget to be on the lookout for it, and that's a good thing because it just means you've been completely out of the habit for so long. So then you might have a day where you feel some anxiety, and you look at it and you go, oh, what's this? What is this coming back? What's going on? It's like, no, 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 it's fine. Like if you had that experience like 3 weeks before your recovery, it wouldn't have bothered you at all. But it's because you've been doing so well and you're out of the habit of watching out for it that you panic and think that something is wrong. But part of recovery is acknowledging those little spikes when they happen, putting them under your belt, and saying, "Okay, yeah, no, that's just a part of the normal kind of ups and downs of recovery. It doesn't mean that it's coming back, and it's actually a really good sign that because I'd forgotten about it for so long."
and then that way you kind of realize, oh, that's what I was doing in the first place. I'm just looking out for it. And then also just I would think of my anxiety as like a good thing. Before I used to be like, oh my God, it's such a bad thing. And it's like, but now I'm like, okay, it's a good thing. It's like a, self-preservance, or I don't know how to say it. I'm just trying to keep myself safe. And it's like a system that I have, if I was like an operating system, they've included this antivirus system to
Right.
kind of keep me safe and alive, but I don't need to use it most like in modern society right now, like I don't need to use it how I was operating it, you know. So
Yeah.
kind of realizing it's a good thing, but I don't need it right now. Like I don't need the flares. I don't need the the life jacket. Like I have it, which is great. But you know.
Right. Right. It's a protective mechanism.
Mhm.
Your body and brain are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They're just doing it at the wrong time. That's all. And that's why it's scary, is because it's happening at the wrong time. But it's for like with a panic attack. Panic attacks in and of themselves are just a defensive mechanism. If a panic attack happens while you're in the middle of a natural disaster, you wouldn't contextualize that as a problem, because you understand, well, this is happening in the correct context. You wouldn't actually verbalize that, but you'd be aware of it.
Yeah.
But if that same experience happens while you're doing your shopping, then you catastrophize that that's a serious problem, because it must mean that you're going crazy, or that you're going to die, or you're having a heart attack, or something terrible is happening. None of these things are happening. It's just that that defensive mechanism is happening in a context where there is no physical stimulus for it, and that's why it feels frightening. But in understanding that not only was this never going to hurt you, but this is literally a protective mechanism. It's the mental equivalent of a fire alarm going off when there's no fire. And it's really annoying and it's really distracting, but it's there for a reason. It's just happening at the wrong time. But our job in recovery is to stop focusing on the fire alarm and understand that it's running on batteries, and it'll fade away and stop. But in the meantime, just accept that it's there, focus away from it, and get your life back on track. Rocio, there's going to be people watching this interview who may be going through DPDR, who might be in a very, very similar position to where you were when this first started. What advice would you have for them? Or what advice would you have for yourself if you go back and have a chat with yourself a couple of weeks into this?
Um, that's a good question. I guess at the time I would have just said to, but I also would have hated if someone said to just be positive. So I'm not gonna say that because I would have been like, oh, shove it. Like, do not tell me to be positive about this. This is horrible. But I would say to just kind of be excited about the future because it will kind of like subside, and also that it's okay to not know when, because I want it like I need like deadlines. I need fish. That's the way I've always been. But when it comes to this, like you won't have that. So just be excited overall for it to come, but no need to be stressing over like when or where, because it's gonna happen anyway. So
Yeah, for sure. The deadlines thing is such a common misperception, um, because we're so used to having deadlines and having a very specific kind of like dates and figures. And as somebody who works in statistics, this is something that is, very an important part of your work. But
yeah,
when it comes to something like an anxiety-based condition, putting deadlines or timeframes on it, even with the best of intentions, it's giving too much weight to the anxiety. The example I always like to give is like, if you've got a song stuck in your head, you wouldn't say to yourself, okay, this song has to be gone at 4 o'clock tomorrow because I have an important meeting. Okay. So I'm going to check in on it every hour on the hour and make sure that I'm thinking about it less and less. And with the best of intentions, and it's ostensibly, it kind of seems like a good plan, but all you're doing inadvertently is you're telling your brain, this is important. This deserves a deadline. This needs you to check in on it over and over again. And all the time you're giving it weight that it doesn't deserve or need. And as counterintuitive as it feels, not giving it a deadline and not giving it a time frame, and simply taking your attention and focusing away from it, which feels deeply counterintuitive at the start, gives your brain the space to say, okay, well, we don't need this. This doesn't actually have any weight. And the weight that it had was because I was constantly checking on it. All I have to do is take my attention, focus away from it, and my body and brain will let this go. Rocio, it's been so lovely speaking with you today. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your experience. I'm delighted to see that you've recovered and that the DP manual was helpful in that process. I'm excited to see what happens next in your professional life.
Thank you for having me.
It was great to chat to you. Take care. Bye-bye.